Welcome back. Still tuned in to News and Views with myself, Salailo Makwidiri, on your home of humanitarian journalism. It's 8:47, and it's time for our hashtag Africa Focus feature. This is a part of the show where we essentially go onto the continent of Africa. We'll look at some of the most pressing stories, some of the pressing issues that our home continent of Africa needs to look at, need to analyze, need to understand. And this intersectional, whether it's in North Africa, it's in Southern Africa, East Africa, Central Africa, it doesn't matter. If it's a pressing issue, it's one that's affecting Africans at this current moment. We need to look into it, we need to understand it, and everyone across the continent needs to know about it. This time around on our hashtag Africa Focus feature, we'll be headed to East Africa, to Kenya to be specific, where the echoes of resistance are growing louder and the crackdown is more brutal. Yesterday marked Sabah Saba, the historic 7th of July pro-democracy day in Kenya. It was once a day to remember the struggle against a one-party dictatorship, but it has now become a fresh battleground between civil society and state power. As Kenyans took to the streets in Nairobi to honor the 1990 democratic uprising, they were met with tear gas, water cannons, and blockades. Police closed off key roads, shut down malls and schools, and turned the capital into a ghost town. All of this amid rising anger over tax hikes, corruption, police brutality, and the death of a teacher and blogger Albert Ojwang, who unfortunately passed away while in police custody. And there's been question marks raised about the circumstances of how Albert unfortunately passed. And we also those powerful images of resistance by the Gen Zs, who in a lot of ways have been behind this newfound rising up against power in Kenya in the last few years. And yeah, we'll be unpacking all of that with Dr. Njuki Githethwa. He's an activist and scholar with the Kenya Left Alliance, and he's been closely following these developments. And I think he understands just the broader context of state repression and, most importantly, youth resistance in modern day Kenya. He's coming to us live from Nairobi. Dr. Githethwa, thank you so much for joining us on News and Views. Really appreciate you giving us your time. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Salelo. From Selalo.
Yes,
Can you hear me?
Selalo, got it. Yes.
Selalo, I think it's a name that I'm trying to get into understanding now. I thank you very much for this show, and coming up from Nairobi. I think today Nairobi is quite chilly when you compare it to other months, but I'm okay. Thank you so much.
No, definitely. I think let's kickstart the conversation with the scenes from yesterday. What was the day supposed to be about? I know I touched on it a bit on the intro. And ultimately, what did it turn to? And what is the mood on the ground? What did you witness during this year's Sabah Saba protest? And most importantly, how can you describe the government's response? I know it's a multi-layered question, but I think if you could just break it down for our listeners so that they understand what's currently happening in Kenya.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much for. I think I will. I'll give a short background of what is called the Sabah Saba. In Kiswahili, that's a Kiswahili word meaning 7/7. It's 7th of July. And this was to mark the protests that happened in the 1990s, preferably 1990, to demand for multiple democracy in Kenya. And for many years, Kenya has been a one-party dictatorship, first of all by the regime of Jomo Kenyatta, the first president, but also later on by the second president, Daniel Arap Moi. And in 1990, there was a wave of protests that happened demanding for multiple democracy. And one of the most vicious was the one that was held on July 7, 1990, in which masses of people led by opposition politicians emerged, and they went to the streets. They went to a popular place called Kamukonji in Nairobi to demand for multiple democracy. Now, yesterday's protest was to commemorate the July 7 protest. They are called Sabah Saba. And again, the government or the regime of President Ruto cracked down on the protesters with, as usual, heavy dose of suppression, but also a heavy dose of crackdown. And they barricaded the entire city center, for example. The city center of Nairobi was barricaded, just like the way they are barricaded. Now, this time they didn't barricade. Last time in the protest to June 25, this year they barricaded State House, they barricaded the Parliament, the Supreme Court with barbed wires. Now they barricaded completely the city center that people could not get into. Many people who were trying to get into the city completely could not be able to do much. And exactly that was happened within the protest yesterday. And you could see that all over. And after that, but once the city was barricaded, and there were very few people on the streets yesterday because they could not be able to penetrate. Of course, some people were able to penetrate a little bit of them. But now the resistance went back into the suburbs, into the villages, into the towns out of the city. And you could find that yesterday almost about 20 out of 47 counties, there were massive protests across the country. So there's nothing really that was able to do to stem the waves of discontent emerging in the country. And this is what we are seeing.
Something that's been really concerning for me in the last few years when it comes to some of the protests that we've seen in Kenya is this visible show of force and a militarized kind of approach by the authorities. What's behind this? What's behind this kind of response by the government to what is meant to be a peaceful democratic commemoration? And another fact that really sparked my interest when just looking at the response of the government is Kenya's interior minister, I think is Murkomen, if I'm not mistaken, who described the protests as being terrorism disguised as dissent. What does that also tell us about the state's attitude towards civil liberties and most importantly organized protest in Kenya, which I would assume is legal? Kenya is a democracy at the end of the day.
Yeah, let me just give a little bit of background before I come to a regime which is scared, not by the people, but the regime scared of itself. President Ruto rose after the elections on the wave of what he called the hustlers narrative. And sorry, there's a lot of they've called in Nairobi, so that's why you see what they call the hustle narrative is a narrative where he promised that he will lift millions upon millions of young people out of poverty. And the young people, many of them bought into that narrative. And they trusted in him. But systematically, he has been able to betray the hopes the young people had in him. And some such of those people who have been marginalized from socio-economic upliftment over the years. Now, the same young people, these now fronted by the Gen Zs, of course, it's the Gen Zs, but now there is across generations, you see the millennials, you see many other kind of people supporting the struggle. The same people that were betrayed by the regime are now turning back against him. It is what we find in many languages. It's called the opposite of love is hate. The way they loved him, the same way now they hate him with the same passion and the same vigor that they were with him. And so we find a regime that is besieged. It's a regime that is scared itself. And that's why you see that any kind of protest, it is being cracked down, it is being suppressed with the full might of the law, because he is a regime which President Ruto is scared of itself. And he wants to do it in terms of not in the democratic processes, but by using the police, the military, to be able to crack down on exactly what is happening in the country. So that's why you see these reckless statement, for example, the Minister for Inter Security, which comprises of the police, saying that they will shoot to kill people once you attack a police station. This was a reckless statement because it shows now a regime which is full of itself, full of its own power, realizing that all leadership, all military power, and that it's built on clay feet. And that's why you see they are doing all those kind of reckless statements. But the only thing that is very crucial is that there is no there is no way that the young people and the waves of discontent will subside. Once people lose trust from you, there's nothing you can do now. Trust is gone. And there's, even if you try to do good things, nothing will happen. The calls for dialogue yesterday, for example, by Raila Odinga, is bypassed by time. There's a time that President Ruto called for dialogue within the young people, and he set up a big multi-sector committee to look at the dialogue issues once after the election, the post process last year, but nothing happened because it was boycotted by the young people. The same thing will happen. The only visible thing that will do is to resign, like the people are saying. If the young people are saying Ruto must go, exactly that's the statement that they want to hear. They don't want that short of that. And if he's wise enough, which I doubt, then he will be able to create a transitional regime that will be able to shelf people into genuine democratic elections. If he does not do that, we expect every element of discontent to ignite the people, and Kenya might be ungovernable for a long period of time to come. We have seen even, for example, the murder of a teacher and blogger, Alberto Joang, sparking serious protests. We have seen the discontent with the murder of a hawker selling masks in the streets, Boniface Mwangi. It's created a lot of discontent. People are alienated by by some things, which normally in the last years would not have been able to be ignited. These elements of anger, discontent, and frustrations which this government can never assuage. And for example, look at it. In the previous years, Sabah Saba protests. There have been Sabah Saba protests, for example, since 1990. There have been demonstrations and processions for Sabah Saba. Even the last 2 years, they have been led by social justice centers. They have been in the street of Nairobi, and there have been, of course, massive protests as well. But they have never gone to this level that we are seeing right now. That we see yesterday. So there's any good leader would understand that there is something that is very, very fundamental wrong with the way people are reacting to a regime, and any good leader will realize it's time for me to vote out. If, for example, you love yourself and you love country and you love your dignity, which I doubt he has.
And I think a lot of that can be said about a lot of African leaders here on the continent. What's the situation like right now in Kenya on the ground? What kind of conversations are being had by organizations, by young people? Are there more protests that are being planned? And the government in itself, you spoke about this big dialogue that is supposedly going to be had between the government and the young people of the country. How is the youth responding to that? Just give us the lay of the land when it comes to the current affairs of Kenya at this moment after what happened yesterday.
Yeah, for a long time, particularly since last year, the June 25th finance protest against the finance bill protest, the mood in the country has been the mood of apprehension, uncertainty, and of course fear, and particularly the young people, because there have been abductions that have been happening, people disappearing. There's elements of crackdown, of tapping of phones. Many things have been happening, crackdown in a huge way. So the waves have been continued, and even after June 25 protest this year, the same fear, apprehension continues. Now, even Sabah Saba now showed us that the waves will continue. There's, for example, questions that are rising, and I think there's plans that are rising, maybe celebrate just like the way before, Nane Nane, maybe Tisa Tisa, Kumi Kumi, and many other things. These will still be waves of discontent, and any region, even more himself, when he was faced with this kind of protest in 1990s, he gave away to multiple democracy. You remember that the people surrounding him were saying Kenya cannot be able to allow for multiple democracy. But pushed to the wall by the same kind of protest we are seeing, he will be able to give in to some elements, even to have some elements of stability. So this will continue. But I don't think his people around him who are so blinded by power and wealth and corruption will be able to give in to what he wants us to want, what people want. So it means the process will continue, and discontent will continue. There's nothing we'll do that will please the people. But now it is upon us. It's upon the force on the ground to be able to prepare for a transition. And many of us are saying we don't have to wait for 2027 elections. We need to be prepared right now to be able to seize the instruments of leadership from a falling and faltering regime. And this exactly is what is happening on the ground. So even if there are protests that are happening all over, I think there's many sectors organizing for various ways. What some of us are sure about is that the status quo should not be handed to another status quo regime. The young people that we are talking about, if they have come so openly, then these young people should be the mantle of leadership for the new republic. Because once we have feeding politicians taking over the mantle of leadership, nothing is actually exactly happened. It is like what Karl Marx said, that there are two camps of hostile brothers. There's nothing that will happen mainly in terms of deep fundamental changes. But I think this is what is being organized. And as we know all over, that to be able to organize and plan for alternative leadership is a work in progress. But I think that is happening on the ground. But on the whole, in the villages where we are and in the town city center, you will find, of course, apprehension. You'll find uncertainty. You'll find a serious dislike on the government. I think this is the most disliked government almost since independence. I think ratings has gone so low. And even if now they were called elections, I think, and Ruto, without any doubt, Ruto will lose very badly to whoever will be running.
No, definitely. I just have one last question before I let you go. How do you respond to people that are saying what we're witnessing in Kenya right now could be the beginning of something that might resemble an Arab Spring of some sort for the African continent? We've seen similar images coming out of Uganda, where there's been mass protests against the government there. We've seen in Mozambique there was something similar after the elections that they've had regarding the government. Even here in South Africa, the ANC, for the first time since our democracy, they've went below getting a majority government in the elections. Are we seeing a move away from the traditional liberation movements, political parties that have brought quote unquote freedom to African countries because of the promises that were not delivered, especially for the young people, for the Gen Zs, like we are seeing in Kenya?
Yeah, I see a kind of waves of protest spring across Africa. We saw them, we are seeing them in Nigeria, the EDSAS protest. And even the other day, there were protests in Nigeria. We saw them in Ghana. We are now seeing them in Togo. We saw them in Zambia. We saw them in Mozambique and many others, even South Africa and elsewhere. There is a kind of discontent that you find with the new generation. It's across the board that you find all over Africa. The only thing that we must be very, very careful is for this kind of protest by young people to be betrayed and to be aborted along the course. We saw that, for example, the Sudanese uprising that happened, and the young people were in the forefront, the socialists were in the forefront in Sudan. But exactly what happened? The military, once Bashir left, the military guys took over. They're the same military people who are now fighting. What has happened, for example, in Nigeria, and what's happening, for example, in Ghana and elsewhere. So the young people in Kenya and the protests that are happening, we hope and work towards that this revolution, if I may call it so, will not be betrayed by the same force of status quo. And that's where it is very important for the forces on the ground, the boots on the ground, to be able to see if, for example, power falls. For example, now Ruto leaves office, the ones who will take over must be radical, must be progressive, by people who believe that Kenya and elsewhere in Africa must have fundamental changes that we have never realized since independence. The question of land, the question of economy, the question of equitable distribution of resources, the question of a sovereign state must come to such a person. If we have the same band of politicians, what I call initially the warring band of hostile brothers, there will be no fundamental change. But for me and others, we see this is the beginning in Kenya of a radical shift, radical change, which must be very, very well chauffeured. In Kikuyu people, where I come from, we call it Itweka. Itweka is a word which is mean generational breakaway. And I find this is the right time for us to do that Itweka ceremony for the Kenyan people. If we betray them, we might never recover. The same thing that we did during when Kenya was getting independence. We didn't give to the people who believe in the people. We didn't give it to Kema. We didn't give it to Piogo Mapinto or Kagia or Jaramogi. We gave it to Jomo Kenyatta, who came and betrayed the heroes of the ethos of independence. The same thing will happen today. It's a generational breakaway. And if we let it go away, then we shall never regain it, and we shall forever regret it. That's what I would say for now.
No, definitely. And I think you remind me of a very powerful quote by Nelson Mandela. He once said, if the ANC does to you what the apartheid government has done, then do to the apartheid government, then do to the ANC what you did to the apartheid government. So very, very powerful. Njuki, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate giving us the time and hope to chat again as the situation in Kenya continues to unfold.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All the best.
All the best. Njuki Githethwa, independent scholar, writer, and activist coming to us from Kenya, Nairobi, or Nairobi, as many like to call it. And I think, really, really interesting times ahead because, I think what's happening in Kenya almost resembles what's happening all across the continent. And it's a story that we'll definitely be keeping an very close eye on. And that's how we wrap up our hashtag Africa Focus feature. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, News and Views continues.